I know how many hours I have spent working with colleagues on amendments and map changes, and I know that that is many multiples for staff. So first, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for working weekends and holidays and evenings and just going so above and beyond to support policymakers as we make these critical decisions that are really policymaker decisions. And you provided the support and guidance that we need to make those final decisions, and will continue to do, as I've said before, in the years and decades to come. Minneapolis has always been a city with a diversity of choices. Our city grew along streetcar lines, and the historic fabric of our city was one with single-family homes next to apartment buildings, with small shops and people's, in the basement of people's homes, and the rich history of how the diversity of our city showed up in the physical environment. And then over time, the city slowly made those choices illegal. And it was done in a way that was particular to racial exclusion in housing. And so when you hear the differences of opinion of folks across the city, some of it is based on a really different experience of living in our city. We have places of great wealth and privilege in Minneapolis, and we have places of deep poverty. And those are often found along lines of race, the consequence of decisions that were made over decades to exclude people from neighborhoods in the city of Minneapolis. And I'm really proud of the work and grateful for the work that our staff did, along with partners at Augsburg College and the University of Minnesota, to acknowledge that head on and to use the comprehensive plan as one of many, many tools that our city needs to tackle the worst racial disparities in the country, and to really use every tool we have. As Council Vice President Jenkins said so eloquently, one of the many ways that this plan will be implemented as part of a greater body of work is through the Race Equity Action Plan. So centering race equity in this one tool that we have as our city grows and changes is part of a much bigger body of work to integrate a true focus on race equity in everything that the city of Minneapolis does. I think that this plan does two things. First, it sets a bold vision for our city to tackle racial exclusion in housing and climate change head on. But it does it in a way that is incremental and that is gentle. And I think that you can see this in one way, in the way that we've approached housing. In the city of Minneapolis, 4 years ago or so, we legalized accessory dwelling units in the city. That means that in every owner-occupied home, a person in Minneapolis can add a second unit. That benefit didn't extend to houses where renters live, like 80% of my constituents and more than half of our city as a whole. And in those 4 years, we've had about 100 new units built. It's not a dramatic change, but it is one way to restore housing options to every neighborhood in our city and to create that diversity of housing options that our city has historically had before apartment buildings were banned from neighborhoods in our city. Through our inclusionary zoning ordinance, we have addressed the issue of the fact that, when we get new buildings in neighborhoods, the rents are often high. And again, one tool that will help us get hundreds of affordable units as our city grows. Had we had this ordinance in place during the past few years, we would have had as many affordable units built through this tool as we do through our Affordable Housing Trust Fund every year. Again, hundreds of units built along the Greenway or in downtown or along the light rail lines. So starting in January, every market rate building that increases by 60% of the size of the building will be required to put affordable units in. Throughout the year, we will develop a financial tool. There was pretty significant pushback from developers on this policy. So starting next year, there will also be financial tools available in exchange for deeper affordability in those apartment buildings. And as we do with all policy change, we will monitor and adjust all of these changes as we go forward. And perhaps the most significant and exciting thing coming next year is the development of our transportation action plan. It'll be a huge priority for me to work together with Councilmember Reich, continuing our partnership on these details of transportation and land use to make sure that when we focus growth along transit in our city, as this plan does, as it continues the policy that the city has had for the past several decades of concentrating growth in those communities that have the best transportation access and service, that we have a true transit system in our city, and that relies on the partnership of Hennepin County, of the Metropolitan Council. We need funding, sustainable funding for transit from the state legislature. We may even want to bring our own funding to the table and make sure that operations are working really well in those neighborhoods where so many people are dependent on transit, and where we hope that by providing true, reliable transit service and transportation options, people will use that choice, and we'll be able to use that as one tool to fight against our city's contribution to climate change in reaching the goal of our very aggressive goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 80%, which will only be achieved through building changes to our buildings, the building energy use, and transportation changes in our city. Again, the comprehensive plan is just one tool to reach these goals of eliminating racial disparity and local fight, contributing to our local fighting against climate change. And it's something that will be implemented through many, many things in the coming years. In particular, I think the changes that council members have led related to race equity have really taken those goals and made them real and concrete. So Councilmember Cano's work to bring forward more detail to green zones and to work together with council members Cunningham and Ellison and Jenkins on cultural districts. I mean, that's an idea that will only take shape with the leadership of council members, and that's why it's so exciting to have such a talented city council full of bold leaders who will be working hard to implement this plan. This plan has ideas like innovation districts where we could use green energy to do things that cities have never done before. And I'm really excited about all the creative ideas that are coming forward. So in closing, I just want to thank all of my colleagues for all of the detailed work and the thought that went into this. In many ways, we're just getting started after years of work now in implementing the plan. I just want to note a couple things too in closing. You know, this plan really came through very incrementally through two different city councils. So at the beginning of the process, last term, we unanimously adopted a community engagement plan, which was intentional in reaching communities of color and cultural communities who often don't get involved in planning efforts like this. This is the most ambitious community engagement plan or methods of any policy development like this that our city has had, and significantly more than any other comprehensive plan has ever had. And I'm really grateful for the ways that staff went above and beyond in coordination with our Neighborhood and Community Relations Department to make sure that we were reaching communities that are not often involved in conversations like this. We adopted 14 goals last term, and then the new council came in and took that vision and really helped shape it into these details. And I'm excited to see where we are going next.